On Saturday, September 29th, Irma and I flew into Casper for our 15th teaching expedition and our first trip to Wyoming. On Sunday, we headed west to the WindRiver Reservation and the Arapaho people. From the road, we could see pronghorn antelopes feeding on the sagebrush. They always looked up and then ran away as we stopped to photograph them. There were also a lot of horses visible from the road. The air was amazingly clean and the land beautiful. Wyoming is very sparsely populated. The capital, Cheyenne, has roughly 53,000 people, Casper about 48,000, Riverton 9,000, Lander about 6,000, Du Bois 962 people, Matweetsie around 40, and South Pass City has 6 residents on a good day. We settled in at St. Stephen's Indian Mission School and began learning about the Arapaho people. The Arapaho are believed to have migrated to the plains about 1,000 years ago from the northern Minnesota area. They settled eventually in the Colorado area, but after the Sand Creek Massacre in 1864, about 800 fled north into Wyoming. Most were women, children, and elders. Over the next few years, they petitioned for land of their own. The United States government negotiated with Chief Washakie of the Shoshone to place the Arapaho on the Shoshone Reservation at Wind River. This was done in 1878 as a temporary measure. As time passed, the two tribes learned to live together, and the Arapaho eventually were able to pay the Shoshone for their portion of the reservation. St. Stephen's School was opened in 1888, and it was here that we were to spend the month. We moved into St. Stephen's House of Healing and began exploring our surroundings. Father Dominic opened the exquisite little church to us so that we could video the inside artwork. The Arapaho aesthetic influences were striking. The ceiling painting, the drums holding the holy water and the altar, the paintings of the Madonna and the Sacred Journey, the Stations of the Cross, the crucifix against the teepee poles, and the eagle at the back over the entrance. It is an architectural treasure. We began teaching on Monday, October the 1st. Dara Weller, who was our original contact person, introduced us to Francine Lone Bear and Perry Ann Stanley, who were to loan us their rooms and their students for the month. We began with golden eagles in the first class, pronghorn antelope heads in the second class, and buffalo heads in the 2 afternoon classes. This was our first attempt at teaching high school students, and they kept us moving. We began exploring our temporary home and found that hundreds of blackbirds roosted each sunset among the cottonwood trees down by the Wind River. Then we noticed that every day at sunrise they would fly off to the southwest, only to return each night at sunset. There were so many that the migration took easily over an hour each morning and each evening. We grew very fond of the 3 little rabbits who nibbled daily on the plants around our house, and the horses grazing peacefully behind us. The weather was particularly beautiful during the week, and we had fun catching the sunset over the Wind River. Meanwhile, the classes progressed slowly. Students were called away for math testing, English testing, and sports. During the week, classes only lasted for 45 minutes and only 30 minutes on Fridays. Normally, we have many participants putting in 60 hours of sewing during the month. Here we were really lucky if we had anyone sewing for even 12 hours over the 4 weeks. When the first weekend came, Irma and I journeyed north to Cody, hoping to do the loop through Yellowstone and the Grand Tetons. Only the snows fell and the road was closed. The weather changes in Wyoming can be sudden and severe, so throughout the state there are road closed signs requiring a return to the nearest town, and road barriers come down across the road, very similar to railroad crossings in the east. Arriving safely in Cody, but unable to go further, we visited the 5 Buffalo Bill museums and the Irma Hotel and Restaurant, which was named after Bill's daughter, Irma. On Sunday, we headed back to St. Stephen's, stopping to watch a herd of mule deer grazing peacefully on the sagebrush. We arrived back in time for another lovely sunset. During the second week, I was making a major effort to learn the students' names. Ricky, Mikey, Carmela, Stephanie, Autumn, Ambrose, Charmaine, Rex, Jake, and Natasha. Natasha had just shot and dressed out her first deer. It would help to feed her family during the long winter to come. Hunting is a vital part of Wyoming culture. Both Francine and Perry Ann teach Arapaho culture in the high school. During most of the 1900s, the Arapaho language was spoken outside of school and forbidden in school, where only English was allowed. By the 1950s, there was still no electricity on the reservation, and everyone knew the Arapaho language. When electricity came in, TVs were introduced and soon replaced the stories and the legends told by the grandparents. Today, English is spoken everywhere but in the classroom, where Arapaho is taught in culture classes, along with tribal history, beading, star quilts, hide tanning, and teepee construction. During the second weekend, with snow being predicted, Irma and I journeyed north to Thermopolis and its population of about 3,000 people. We stayed in the Hot Springs State Park, where we photographed the buffalo, the red hills, and explored the hot springs. Part of the springs are still free to the public, as requested by Chief Washiki when he ceded the land to the government. The land around the springs has a lot of limestone and gypsum, which has created some very unique land formations along the river. The Wind River unites with Owl Creek below Thermopolis and changes its name to the Bighorn River. In an unsuccessful attempt to find Legend Rock, we wandered off the main roads and discovered some of the oil fields that have proliferated over the past 7 years. Wyoming says that it is the only state that produces more energy than it consumes. Clearly, the energy companies are changing the landscape. On the way back to St. Stephen's on Sunday, we stopped to photograph the wild beauty of the Wind River Canyon, with its signs noting the ages of the rock formations. The canyon is still a spectacularly beautiful part of the reservation. During the third week of sewing, I realized that everyone was not going to be able to finish. So I began to concentrate on those who were furthest along, so that we would be certain to get a few of each creature completed to serve as examples for those that remained unfinished. The buffalo heads were piling up. Mikey was the first to finish her golden eagle. Dara and Francine then completed their eagles. Carmela finished her antelope and was quickly followed by Charmaine and Ambrose. I love the antelopes. I think they're really fun. Looks good. Ricky was the first to complete his buffalo. I finished a buffalo and an antelope for the high school, and Irma made a golden eagle for the elementary school.
That's not your first eagle, is it?
Irma was kept busy throughout the weeks, cutting an unending number of pieces and then patterns. I prepared instructions and prodded the sewers. One afternoon, Irma and I decided to explore Fort Washakie, the Shoshone Center, and the old cemetery where Sacagawea is buried along with her two sons. A sculpture nearby honors her voyage as a young woman leading Lewis and Clark to the Pacific Ocean. During the last weekend, Irma and I headed northwest to Du Bois. On the road, we encountered our first cattle drive, which required a major slowdown in speed. Du Bois is an old Wild West town with wooden boardwalks, a cowboy grill, and an outlaw saloon. We found a charming cabin at the Twin Pines Lodge and then explored the town between bouts of snow and rain. Du Bois also has a museum devoted to the bighorn sheep with stuffed heads of all of the different kinds of sheep from around the world. The Iranian and Afghanistan breeds were particularly interesting. When we stopped to fill the gas tank, Irma found a giant stuffed jackalope ready to be mounted. Unfortunately, it was way too high for Irma to manage. Upon leaving Du Bois, we journeyed to Whiskey Mountain in hopes of spotting the bighorn herd, but all we saw were more mule deer and lots of snow. The last week saw more pieces being finished. Class pictures were taken. The first class with the eagles, the second with the antelope heads. The last two classes with the many would-be buffalo heads. On Thursday, we started hanging the work in the cafeteria at the elementary school. Combining our soft sculptures with the work from the photography and beading classes taught by Perry Ann, an art show was scheduled for that evening. Fred Antelope and Dara Weller planned a program which included drumming, dancing, an honoring song, and a smudging ceremony. Francine and her family cooked up a feast. Irma and I felt well cared for and honored. It was a very good day. On the road back to Casper, we decided to make the loop south through South Pass City. Irma had been reading the diaries of some of the women who traveled the Oregon Trail, which between 1843 and 1859 saw over 500,000 immigrants walk across Wyoming, through Fort Casper, past Independence Rock, where they often signed their names, to South Pass City, where they crossed the Rockies. From there, some went on to California looking for gold, or on to Oregon in search of rich agricultural land and new communities. South Pass City actually granted women the right to vote in 1869, making Wyoming the first in the nation to honor women's suffrage. Today, South Pass City is a historic center with maybe 6 full-time residents, and nearby Atlantic City has about 40 more citizens and a delightful grill, as well as a gourmet restaurant in the old Mercantile building. As we left Casper and Wyoming, I was thinking about the fact that the Arapaho people, the buffalo, and the antelope had all survived the very cruel 19th and 20th centuries. But today they are all alive and well in 21st century Wyoming.